And thank you. That brings us to the end of the address from our speakers this morning. And a message that has stood out for me quite prominently is the fact that the pandemic has not and did not create the digital divide that we're faced with right now. All it did was expose it, and it made it a lot more visible. And at the same time, what it has done is it's accelerated all this digital innovation in the past 18 months, essentially giving us the tool to address the gap and fix it, provided we do have the political will to do so, the business will to do so, as well as the societal will. I also like what featured quite prominently in terms of the fact that while most or half of the world's population doesn't have access to the internet, even those that do, not all of them have the digital skills to actually benefit from this access. And of course, this is something that we need to also address with urgency. And it leads us into the panel discussion that we will be having around the theme for this year's LKDF, being the digital skills for an inclusive future. And I want to introduce you to the panelists that will be sharing their thoughts and their insights, and also giving their recommendations on how we address the challenge that this entire world is faced with right now. If you will allow me to introduce you to them, we do have Miss Cecilia Ugaz Estrada, who is the Director of Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women, the office there at UNIDO. Good morning, Cecilia.
Good morning, Fifi. Nice to be here.
Yes. Lovely to have you with us. We have David Hollands, the Education Strategist for Asia Pacific at HP. How's it, David?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Fifi. I'm delighted to be here.
Delighted to have you. And last but not least, we do have Gori Yahaya, the CEO and founder of UpSkill Digital. Welcome, Gori.
Good morning, Fifi. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here too.
Thank you. And thank you so much for all of your time, or the time that you have given us this morning. In fact, before we get into the discussion, I'd like for us to just all briefly watch a video that was prepared by UNIDO based on a paper that they have put together on this exact subject. To the audience, the link to the video, or rather the link to the paper, will be available on UNIDO's website. And I believe that it will also be shared in the chat, but I'll update you on those exact details right after the video itself. So let's take a look.
As the world embraces itself for the fourth industrial revolution, new opportunities and skills demands are generated by the transformation of technology, making it essential for individuals to adapt. Digital skills are the top one on the list. But what are digital skills? And how can we increase people's digital literacy? Digital skills are defined as abilities to use digital devices to access and manage information. It is the expertise to create and share digital content, communicate, and have effective problem-solving skills. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the importance of these competencies for equal access to opportunities and resources. However, even in Europe, almost 42% of the population does not have basic digital skills. Lower levels of digital skills are located mainly in Africa and South America. There is a positive association between equality and digital skills. The higher the level of equality in a certain place, more people are equipped with digital skills. And the less inclusivity is promoted, digital skills are obtained by the population to a lesser extent. Gender equality is one of the main factors that affect digital inclusion. The transition to the digital economy requires the closure of digital divides, assuring higher levels of participation of minority groups through the development of digital skills. Only then, no one is left behind, and the jobs of the future are accessible to everyone. And what is the most efficient way of acquiring digital skills? Studies suggest that digital skills are more related to educational programs and vocational training than to years of school enrollment. Vocational training for a more inclusive world is therefore crucial. Moved by a global agreement on the most pressing challenges to be solved, UNIDO and the LKDF work to develop demand-oriented skills in emerging economies, ultimately contributing to social and digital inclusivity.
All right, so let us get to discussing the paper. Yes, it will be available on UNIDO's website, so you can check it in or check for that after the session. And also, it should be shared in the chat. You'll just let us know if you haven't received it. But to begin with the discussion of the morning, Cecilia, I'd like to begin with you. Ladies first. I'll keep to questions. So over the past couple of years, the past decades, we have seen an exponential growth in the supply of technology, right? All the various innovations. We've seen that growth coupled with a demand for digital skills to use some of the technology that has come on board. But yet we have also been presented with a pressing challenge in which not everyone has been able to enjoy the spoils of what has happened. In terms of how the world has changed. So in your view, I'd like you to address what you think some of the challenges are, particularly for marginalized groups. Why is it that they have been left outside?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fifi, and thank you for giving me, the right to speak first. I think it's a great opportunity. So let me probably refer, sort of focus a bit what I'm going to say on UNIDO's mandate. UNIDO is the specialized agency in industrialization. Basically, we are here to support our member states, to increase the participation of industry, within their economies. And what we have observed with increasing, I would say, preoccupation, if you want, is precisely that, there is increasing segmentation in the labor market in manufacturing, and this in particular affects women. We have to basically, say that women are underrepresented. I mean, they are a bit more than 1/3 of the workforce that works in manufacturing are women. But it's not only that. It is, one of the main concerns is that really women are clustered in sectors of manufacturing that, first of all, are low intensity, technological intensity. As a consequence, of course, these jobs are, provide less value added, worse salaries, worse working conditions, and they are for some reason stuck there. They are not able to move into other branches of industry where they would potentially be, their talent will be better utilized. They will be contributing also to the increasing shaping of these new technologies. And so they are actually being prevented really to have, some wider benefits for the rest of society. Another issue which I think is also very important is that, as we know, there are lots of jobs, if I understand correctly, it's more than 50% of jobs that will be in need of reskilling in the very short run. And a study that has, done by UNIDO for the Industrial Development Report that was published on 2020 really shows that there is an increased probability of women, jobs, sort of being performed by women, that will need reskilling, precisely because women are clustered in low-intensity sectors, and the sectors are supposed to be moving up in terms of the complexity and in terms of the technological advance. So the probability of women needing more reskilling than men is about 3%, depending on the countries. Of course, this is a sample of 11 countries because we didn't have comparable data for more, but this is just a sign that, there is really increasing need to focus also on women in the labor market and the needs of reskilling.
Mm-hmm. So it's the structural challenge of women and the space in which they have traditionally played in that is in need of a big overhaul.
Exactly.
Gori, your thoughts here, because we have heard and I'm sure you've even seen in your line of work the huge opportunities that technology has brought forth, and the conversation today is how to ensure that more and more people are able to access them. In your view, what has been the main pressing challenge that has limited the access of the majority?
Thank you again, Fifi, for having me here. Firstly, I just wanted to echo some of Cecilia's points about those that are from minoritized groups and women that are often working in more in roles that are more prone to automation, and for that reason need to be reskilled as soon as more urgently as possible. I work in an organization that is focused on learning programs, right, and making skills more accessible to individuals, in one sense trying to democratize education so it is more accessible for more people. And where the barriers really lie, and there are a number of them, as you mentioned before, Fifi, pandemic didn't create the digital divide, it just exacerbated it. You know, what it's done is really highlighted to us where many individuals who didn't have access to the devices, the data, the simple, what we think are sort of the simple tools that need to be able to access education or access any kind of training, weren't as accessible as we thought they might be, or even farther to get access to than we thought they would be as well. So where we look at the programs that we run and try to scale, we focus on making sure that the sessions that we run, the workshops, the programs, the learning initiatives are made accessible at the point of reach. You know, it could be partnering with organizations around devices, around getting access to better broadband, making sure the content delivery method is easy to digest. So, you know, micro learning, online learning, fitting around your life, making it accessible. You know, those are some of the barriers that people have. If you're in the workplace, you're fortunate enough to be in the workplace, you know, some programs require you to take, you know, quite a lot of time outside of work. And we've seen from the pandemic, there are individuals that have got, you know, home commitments, right, that would not allow you to be able to take that much time out to do learning outside of work. So it's really trying to create more inclusive learning programs that are more accessible, you know, to people across the board. So, you know, what we try to do is really, you know, look at those barriers and find ways to be able to tackle them by making more inclusive learning programs.
You mean mothers and wives and some husbands and fathers, Gori, in terms
absolutely, yes.
David, just your opening comments, just your opening thoughts. Let us know where your headspace is regarding the main challenges as it has pertained to access of the digital economy for most groups.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, in my role at HP, you know, our mandate actually we've set for our organisation twofold. So, firstly, there's just an enormous advantage taking an inclusive approach. As a world-leading company, founder of Silicon Valley, this underpins our success and every one of our peers. So, when we talk about this, you know, industrial digital transformation that we want to bring people into. Firstly, it's absolutely built upon the foundation of inclusivity because that's where economic benefits are. We've worked that out, and that's just a given. So the first thing is there's just this enormous opportunity, and I think, as people have already said, COVID-19 sort of took it took a bandage off, if you like, so we could look at the wound, and we realised it wasn't good. However, we also know that we have incredible technology and medicines to address that. And so, you know, when we conceive, I think, you know, we're talking about why not start with those who are outside of this inclusivity blanket as the first to be brought into the opportunities that are vast. So I'll give you one example. If we talk about cybersecurity globally right now, there are something like 3 million unfilled jobs. That's incredible, right? So it begs the question that there's a great deal of security risk at play here. And so we're talking not just billions, perhaps even trillions of dollars of investment that cannot be spent. So, and what's curious to me is when we've broken this down, it's remarkably simple to think about addressing that. So I think in terms of the challenges, there's an opportunity, no question. It seems very simple on the surface. So it sort of says, why haven't we done it? Why has it been difficult for countries to sort of get into this? It's not as if we didn't know. So I think just at a high level, I think the first thing that we've mentioned is visibility. So when we talk about inclusivity, we must talk about being able to see those which we think of as being outside of the digital skills environment. So I think the very first thing is that we have to understand there's work to be done so that we know who we are going to potentially leave behind and make sure they're visible. The second piece is ensuring that those people have a sense of inclusion in the vision so that they are stakeholders in understanding what it means to develop digital skills. And this is probably the most fundamental of all of the issues facing governments, whether it's developed countries or not. And I attended a seminar last week with the chief scientist of my own country, industry leaders and education and training organisation. This is in Australia. And this was a key problem. So it's actually about how do we bring the understanding of digital skills to the broader community, because that in itself ensures that we can get further. So those are some of my musings initially. It's such a vast topic, and so really, really interesting that we are in an exciting time where we literally can go about doing this. But, clearly there's work to be done in certain areas.
Certainly. And I think that, part of that work is even investing in the digital infrastructure itself, right? So I had a bit of a technical glitch here on my end, but I think everything is fine. Investing in that digital infrastructure and also the energy, right, to ensure a seamless connection at all times. But David, you've started us on a path of correction in terms of the steps that do need to be taken to address this digital inclusion, and to do so at an accelerated pace. And therefore, I'd like to ask the views of the rest of the panel in terms of their ideas and their thoughts on the steps that we need to be taking. And coming back to you, Cecilia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's very important, first of all, to realize that this really requires a very determining effort. Yeah, so these are not things that are going to happen just because the technology is there, and we definitely need to have policies in place, strategies in place. For instance, in the case of for instance of the world is very unequal in any case. We know already there are different cleavages. Gender, of course, is one of them. Ethnicity is another one. Age is another one. Location, whether you're rural or urban, is another one. Disabilities is another one. So you need to really have a very, very tailored view, within your country of who are those who are excluded. Because I think women in some sense are visible, but there are many other reasons why there are other groups that really remain marginalized. And this is, kind of aligned with the vision and the principles of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development that I think we all have heard about. And in particular, why is it that we shouldn't leave anybody behind? But those who are behind sometimes are really behind because we don't have information about them, and we definitely need to make an effort to know, what is it that is really impeding them from reaching and accessing these new technologies and these new tools. Sometimes it's simply because they lack basic infrastructure, as you rightly pointed out. Sometimes it's because they don't have access to basic services like education. But, we definitely, I think that the solutions are really tailor-made at the level of countries and even at the level of provinces within every country. Because, it depends also, on the demographics. It's not the same when you have aging population and when you have a young population. So these are all the things that really should be considered within a broader strategy for each and every country to be able to reach, digital skills for all the population.
Yeah, I think one of the speakers earlier on in the introductory comments spoke about inequality and the correlation between inequality and digital inclusion, right? And spoke about how one of the areas to address it, as you rightly say, is education, and perhaps even vocational education, looking at the different groups that need to be educated at different levels. But just, Gori, your view on how we accelerate digital inclusion in a post-COVID-19 world.
Well, just a couple of things to mention, and actually wanted to use David's point around cybersecurity as an example. I feel there's two sides to this. There is the side of, we're trying to meet basic supply versus demand, right? Where we have organizations that are invested in new technologies and have really brought to the forefront some technologies and challenges that have really spearheaded digital transformation. So real topics, some real tools that are needed to be invested in and have been invested in more ever than so in the last 18 months because of the pandemic. And what businesses are now looking at is, they've got a set of skills that they need that they're struggling to find in the market, right? And that's sort of making it even less accessible for those that can't get access to the skills in the first place. Where do they learn about cybersecurity? Where do they learn about data? Where do they learn about, what is needed, the skills needed for the current workforce right now? So when you're looking at building skills programs, what you do is understand the curriculum, understand what is needed, and make sure that continues to adapt based on the changes in technology and the changes in the needs of the market. That curriculum needs to be built in a way that is accessible to all. But the issue is that you actually have to work even harder to make it more accessible to those that are from harder to reach. demographics, harder to reach communities. So one of the steps that you start to take is looking at kind of a community-based approach. That's what we do when we build our learning programs, which is targeting things like youth centers. We even work with churches. Where do we find individuals that are from potentially lower socioeconomic backgrounds that need to be given greater access to these skilling programs, and helping them also understand what they need to learn, because this is the challenge with digital skills. It's so broad, right? There's so many different areas that we can train and that we can support in. So, one of the ways that we've approached is we've looked at assessments, right? So helping individuals really assess what skills they lack and might need to invest in, and also inspire them to know what are the skills that are needed currently, or the skills that are in demand, so that you can work out how do you build those skills and find the passions that align with those skills. So, trying to build the inclusivity and making sure that there's almost like an equity focused approach to providing upskilling. You target programs that are, for example, built in a way that is not is not I don't know how you say, maybe not detrimental, but more attractive to those from those particular minoritized groups. So you will pull out I'm getting a bit granular with this, but when we are building our programs, we're thinking about the language that we use to make sure that these lessons and these sessions that they go to is attractive. So we look at making sure it's inclusive language. We make sure that we are thinking about our pronouns and thinking about how we can describe the benefits to you in a way that taps into your passions, for example, right? It makes it feel like these are things that are going to be exciting to you. So that community and partnership-led approach, as I mentioned, we have to partner with those on the ground, local communities, to make it feel like it is accessible to them. Because as an individual who is, part of a local community, you have a trust in that community to tell you what is happening in the market, what you may need to learn to be able to to thrive in society, right? And that's typically the approach we take with some of our scalable programs. So, to David's point, I think one of the first steps is really thinking about what you need to train on and how do you make it attractive to those individual minoritized groups, and then create that accessible learning path for them to be able to get onto the programs that hopefully equips them to get into the labor market and thrive when they get there as well.
Thank you for being very granular, because I think your granularity, don't know if that's a word, but it's quite welcome, particularly in a country where I'm from, whereby it's not only English that's spoken, right? We've got 11 official languages in this country, 12, and it's not unique. Many countries speak more mediums than just English, and therefore you do need to make the information accessible to people who might not be fluent in English, right? So it takes concerted effort from all stakeholders in that regard. And just I think on the issue of the skills mismatch, and David, perhaps you can add there. Again, it speaks to the importance of the collaboration, right? Because these private companies know what's missing in their corridors. And at the same time, we have a education curriculum that hasn't really changed that much. So it continues to graduates that don't really align with what the private sector needs. And therefore, perhaps an element of need for the government also to create a framework to enable just the seamless work, that community engagement that you're talking about, whereby we're able to produce what we need and we have what we produce, as it were. David, let me not waffle on anymore. Would you like to add any further to this before we take forward?
Yeah, sure. So I love that. And essentially, when we think about coming back again to, something Gori said earlier, which is around this idea of democratization and look, what's at stake when we get this right? So one of the things that we do find tricky, and certainly for governments. So when I think of governments, generally speaking, I like to think of those as, representative of the people of at least a country. And then when we get down to that community level, even a family level, we're talking about the decision makers and ultimately those that can scale these great ideas and these interventions. So looking at the different parts of the puzzle, all the pieces of the complete picture, we've got the government who ultimately are representative of the people, and it ought to be their solution. It ought to be something that the community feels as though is as much theirs, if not all theirs, and not some sort of outside entity, right? So there's that first piece. But the challenge that they have is to go and change things like education, to embark upon something which has enormous opportunity in it, and certainly involves massive investment, because look, there's no way getting around that. Building infrastructure, you really need to spend a lot of money. It's not a cheap solution. We can't continue to do piecemeal foundation stuff. If your country is reliant on that, you're in trouble. But the challenge for that big investment is really confidence. It's about understanding, have we really incubated something that's risk-free, that we fully understand, that we can put ourselves behind? And this is where the private NGO side does well. So for us to go and work on, looking at, from its very inception, a system that will be a framework that's highly scalable, but ultimately we've done the work of setting a goal, which is, what does our country and community look like when we've done the job? So this is one bit that it's hard, right? So think about, I use the cybersecurity as an example. I dropped in the chat. So I'm doing a project right now that talks about this, because it's such a golden opportunity for, communities that sit outside of our normal radar. So to get 20,000 people trained into a low-level cybersecurity job in the global market currently, low bar set here, their skills are worth about $50,000 annually. That's a low estimate. And their jobs can be done literally from anywhere, assuming you have infrastructure. Now, if you do the maths, if you train just 20,000 people, that's $1 billion per annum in country income. So for some countries, that's like double-digit or more change in their percentage per capita, right? And that's paying taxes, building infrastructure, because you're wondering where all this infrastructure is going to come from. Well, it's going to come from government investment, right? Initially maybe funded, but you need that ROI up front. And I think that's something we have to do. And we have to work together to see that picture. And we need to build a strong business case and play our different roles to support the confidence needed to make that step. So I'm excited about that, but also conscious that, we have, I think with folk like Gori and the many NGOs who are probably joining this call, and people in UNIDO, we certainly have borne witness to programs that have been enormously successful in some of the places you would least think is possible. So the good news is we're sitting on a lot of the IP. The technology has never been more prepared to change things like a light switch overnight. And yeah, I think that's where we're sort of at the moment, is wrestling with working on the policy. And by the way, the training programs, touching back on what Gori is saying earlier, the actual programs that we want to put in place need to be high quality out of the gate, because otherwise we're going to entrench inequity. So if we put something in place that, is basic digital skills, and a point in time we can sort of say, that was nice, we've done this for this community, but we haven't built something long-term that has agility, that is at least up there in terms of equal capabilities to what's out in the world of the developed countries, then rapidly they'll be left behind, because we need to build something that's very agile. So, the whole idea of digital skills is that they need to be quite flexible and ready to change at a moment's notice. So again, what Gori touches on is quite important around the design, the community involvement, and then of course the structure.
Yeah, and I agree with you there in terms of it's going to be a tedious, but also very expensive exercise. And while governments do need to lead the charge, we have governments that have spent so much in the past 18 months just to trying to keep their countries together as a result of the disruption of COVID-19. I wonder how much further their balance sheets can stretch, as it were, which does invite room for the private sector to get involved, especially the private sector that has actually benefited from this crisis, mainly companies in the telecom sector. But we do have engagement coming through from our audience, and I thank you so much for some of your ideas that have come through. And Gori, I know that you are keen to take a question that has come through from Penny, and she's asking which are currently the best digital assessments to use for hard to reach communities.
Thank you for that. And actually, just before I go into the question, I wanted to jump onto David's point about governments and private companies working together, because actually there's a lot that governments can learn from private companies as to how to scale programs that actually reach community-based organization and community-based networks. So I just wanted to mention, I think that, because I think governments can learn a lot, even when the balance sheets are tight, so to speak, because there are scalable frameworks that exist at the moment. Penny, thanks for your question. There aren't many, unfortunately, right? And many that are tailored to those from harder to reach communities. And actually, we are in the process of building one that we're due to launch at the end of the year, so specifically tailored towards helping those from marginalized groups assess and understand the basic digital skills they need to be able to thrive. So, would happily reach out to you and let you know a bit more about that once that's launched. There are others in the market that exist. There is one called MyDigi Skills, which I think was commissioned by the European Commission. The European Commission have a framework called DigComp, which is Digital Competencies Framework, and it's a really interesting framework to identify to help you understand which digital skills are necessary in the market. So that exists. I know a few private organizations, Vodafone, for example, have built the Future Job Finder. There are a few that are popping up, but what really interested us and what sort of drove us to want to build our tool was making sure that the language that it's used is making sure that it's sort of demystifying areas around digital, but also exciting and hopefully sparking the passions to want to learn in those areas without making you feel too worried you don't have the skills you need. So, I will happily, Penny, share with you kind of what we're working on when it's good to launch. But where there are a few that are out there, I'll see if I can get a link and put it into the chat as well.
No, agreed. And I think that that's also an important element as we do go forward, just demystifying some of the concerns, right, around embracing this future, because there's a lot of fear out there of being irrelevant and of being out of a job as a result of the digital overhaul. But nonetheless, Cecilia, just to come back to you and hear a little bit more from you in this session, let's get into more of a discussion around policy making and what you think policymakers and our audience, what message do you think they should get out today? And also, what do you think that they need to be doing to address and provide equal access to all, especially for the young people?
Yes, I think, Fifi, this is an opportunity actually for the whole society to change, right? I think basically the COVID-19 is still unfolding, and the post-COVID-19 will be definitely a world that we can make different. Because, we were all taken really by surprise when the whole pandemic started, and we are actually sometimes very impressed of the things we managed to do. But at the same time, we actually now realize that how, this digital divide can also be yet another cleavage that can also enhance and further sort of create inequalities within society. I think, first of all, we need to move from the stereotypes. In the case, for instance, of women inclusion, we definitely need to evolve from these traditional roles that women are able to do some things and men are able to do some things. I think definitely, society needs to change the way it looks at things, and in particular empower girls and young women to start really technical education, engage further in STEM professions. Only 35% of STEM graduates are women. Only 14% of workers on cloud computing are women. So definitely we are in a world that we need to basically move away from our traditional roles. When it comes to policies, of course, this I think here in all of you, it takes more than two to tango here. We definitely need a kind of very comprehensive and multi-stakeholder approach in order to make the things move. On one side, of course, we have the responsibilities of governments on sort of identifying policies and making strategies. We also, as in the international community, we're here to support the efforts that countries do locally, and especially helping countries to get in touch with each other. This is also our role as a United Nations systems and international communities. What is happening where? Putting experiences of, at the hand of, countries that need them in order to move forward. I want just to quote very quickly, I think maybe David is in a better position than myself to refer to this example, but we have this very long-lasting cooperation with HP, called HP Live, right? Basically the learning initiative for entrepreneurs that has been supporting, the creation of capacities and digital skills for young entrepreneurs around the world. And it's been very successful helping create jobs, but also helping entrepreneurs to be put in touch with potential sources of funding, because their businesses become up to speed once they start the digitalization process. So I think there are several, also going back to the question that Gori was answering. UNESCO is another specialized agency from the United Nations, has a program that is the Digital Literacy Global Framework, that is there basically for countries to try to tailor it up in order to be able to do proper digital assessments. So there are lots of resources that are free of charge, if you want, that could be put to service of for the entire world and the entire societies in order to move on with this digitalization process.
Yeah, and I think platforms like this are quite important to just get the word out there. I think you'll find in many instances people don't even know that there's all this information, and especially as you do say, Cecilia, free of charge. David, do you want to speak more closely about the partnership that HP does have with UNIDO, just the examples that you have seen unfold there, and whether it can be easily replicated with other private institutions and other organizations in your view?
Absolutely. In fact, the great thing about that platform, it's an online platform, works on mobile, works on PC, you name it. But the goal for HP when we started it was really to think about what are the skills that we have as an organization, excellence, levels of excellence in the very basic fundamentals of entrepreneurship, mindsets, all of those things that will make you successful. And as UNIDO and other partners know, these can service people in relatively uneducated, poorer communities across different, sort of disabilities as well, because of the way it's structured, and it's in multiple languages. And we just converted it into all the courses into Bahasa Indonesian. So, and we're willing to keep doing that. But what this does, Fifi, is it's really about that was a precursor. So we're doing that work because we have to think about infinitely scalable platforms, and of course being online it can be, assuming we have digital access. So of course it's not much good if we can't get that. So certainly it's very effective. It's changed millions of lives, and will continue to do it. It's completely free. If there's anyone on this call who wants to leverage it, please do so. In fact, we're happy to support you as well, but you can just go ahead and use it. But this is a part now of a platform we're leaping off to try and improve digital inclusion by 150 million by 2050. And so that's a giant goal. So in terms of what we're trying to do, we're also looking at what are the other areas that we've been covering that as a technology company, we can start to work alongside governments and policymakers and NGOs and organizations like UNIDO to think about what we need to look into, research, and maybe create, whether that's technology that we haven't yet created. I'll give an example. So there's a technology called TV white space where we're using frequencies from TV, and we're revisiting that. We actually use it in some of our research facilities where Wi-Fi is not very good or using 4G doesn't work, and it's far more cost effective. So it has some limitations around you need to do policy around frequency allocation, but it's certainly far better than perhaps more cost effective than sticking up 4G towers and cabling, for example. So is it the long-term solution? No, but it's again, we're trying to find things that can rapidly impact the digital divide, like I said, to a tune of 150 million, no small number. But what that really begs the question about, Fifi, is how do we play a role alongside other organizations to do things that scale? And that always comes back down to, as I said before, helping to enable and empower governments and the people of a country, right? So, it's an open door for me and the team to have dialogues with everyone on this call to figure that out. We haven't got all the answers, but certainly I think organizations like ours are trying to step up and play a bigger role in that support.
Perhaps not all the answers, but enough to get going, right? Gori, you'd like to speak further on increasing access?
Absolutely. And look, I think it's incredible that organizations like HP and David's are really investing in providing access to skills to really try and tackle this gap. And there are many other that are out there. Google have programs, Microsoft have programs, and the idea is to really create those courses so people can get access to them. But we also have to be aware of those that can't comfortably access an online course and complete it. And how we have tackled that, and before the pandemic obviously was much easier to get on the ground and deliver workshops. We still feel, and especially the community-based approach that we take, we still feel it's incredibly vital to be able to provide that face-to-face engagement where possible, right? And if not possible, where do we partner with organizations that can provide devices, provide broadband, provide access for them to be able to do so as well? And I think, David might have mentioned before, but I think their organization is doing a lot of that with organizations to be able to provide that access. We've done some very large programs across about sort of 20 to 22 countries across Africa, where we have over 700 trainers that are delivering community-based workshops to their local, their local communities, and equipping those trainers with the skills to be able to engage, excite, and build confidence in digital skills. And we're doing that globally. To date, I think we've reached over just under 600,000 people face-to-face or virtually live through our sessions, because we understand the power of partnerships, and we understand the power of bringing it to individuals. And hopefully as doors start to open and people start to be able to engage, we need to help those that are unable to to access those training programs as well. So there are models that work in terms of scale, and it starts with organizations like David's really investing in providing skills, good quality training, good quality programs that allow for confidence building and excitement into, and hopefully changing the mindsets around the needs to have the skills to be able to thrive in the future, in the future workforce.
Just to follow up there, Gori, because you're touching on a question that's also come from the audience, and just specifically with the work that you are doing on the African continent to increase access to your online programs. Was that enabled by policy frameworks that were put in place by the governments to increase those partnerships, would you say? How did you establish and navigate that or on that terrain, particularly on the continent?
Absolutely. So there was an absolute need to work with governments on the ground to help us engage some educational establishments, to help us really scale the program and give it the visibility that it needs to all demographics and all communities themselves. So, Google have Google Digital Skills program across the continent that has been delivering for about 6 or so years, and within each country, governments will hopefully make themselves accessible to say, we would love to be able to drive this level of training across the country, and we have targeted institutions that we want to be able to partner with to be able to provide this at scale. So what needed to happen is to create the training program in a way that it was modular, but also accessible to partnerships. So, what happens is you could quite comfortably say, within a particular country, we would like to take this program and feed it into this university so that they can now engage their audiences and most importantly, make it free. And that's absolutely key. So again, accessibility, comes from making it free, right? It comes from making it something that, you don't need to invest in, and especially at the basic level. Right. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to help those get from a very low level digital skills to the point that they're able to participate and engage and thrive in the labor market. Obviously, we also have the extended courses around more advanced skills, more technical skills, but it's really important that you create this framework and the model that allows for policymakers, for government to say, okay, we can take that and slot that into the programs that you already have. And we can make it as accessible as possible. So that's typically how we try to work, and it's great where you have governments that are more open, to that level of collaboration, especially if it's with a private organization, because I think that partnership is key. We have a lot of individuals that are currently not getting access that they need, so working fast is important.
Yeah, just staying perhaps on the same theme, Cecilia, and speaking on the experience of UNIDO and the partnerships it has with HP, I'm sure with various other players. In your view, how can governments and businesses, or institutions and businesses going forward, foster those kind of ties, especially when it comes to the common goal of improving the digital literacy and the digital capability of the workforce? Perhaps share some experiences on how that is being done within UNIDO's corridors.
Mhm. Okay. We would like that the fourth industrial revolution, would be something that is really also a reality in developing countries to start with. Yeah. So, and I think, increasingly what we are seeing is, of course, the necessity of having digital skills widespread in order for industry to be able to provide decent jobs, including, creating more value added, making more competitive the countries, and in particular becoming, a place where both women and men can really deploy their talent and their creativity and their intelligence, if you want. So, I mean, in this, for instance, talking about only the African continent, and it is my understanding that by 2030, there will be more than 200 million jobs requiring digital skills, only in Africa. So
Sure.
where these jobs are going to go? I mean, I think this is very, very important, and this is why it really requires a very determined action on the side of the public authorities and governments in order to be able to really have proper strategies when it comes to building digital skills. I mean, of course, governments alone will not move this. It's really too much, and it really requires the context of the whole society. So that's why I think increasingly we have to be seeing more partnerships between, private sector, NGOs, really also NGOs and civil society in general, creating awareness and actually demanding that these transformations happen at the level of society. And I think this is the only way that really we're going to be able to embrace the digital age without leaving, people behind.
I'd like for us to go into some closing comments because we're left with around 10 minutes or so for this panel. And I'd just like to get your views on what you think the key takeaways of not only this session that we're having, but of course the whole day should be for our audience members and our various stakeholders. Cecilia, perhaps just beginning with where we started, with you again once more, in terms of your key takeaways for the session that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think, digital skills are, of course, not the skills for the future or for the present, right? And if we really want to move towards a more inclusive society, we really definitely need to work towards having, these skills accessible to all. And, this is, the role also of international organizations like UNIDO, the whole UN system, rallying behind this transformation of societies that really making, the benefits of development really be accessible for all.
And Gori, in your closing thoughts, perhaps also can I ask you a question to address the younger generation who are also in on this and are looking at this, and just an advice to them on how to upskill themselves so that they are ready to thrive in a workforce, as we've heard from Cecilia, in which you've got almost 200 million jobs on the continent in the digital space that could be up for grabs.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the first thing is all about confidence, right? We will continue to have new technologies coming into our lives more often than we ever realize they'll come in. So, have the belief that you can learn this technology. Have the belief that you can learn the skills and the tools and the techniques that you need to be able to thrive in the workplace, and then get access and have a look and search for some of these programs that exist. David has mentioned the program that they do at HP, which is fantastic. Access to free training. Google have a program, Microsoft have a program. There are many that are out there. There are also some assessment tools to assess what skills you might need that might even prompt you to think about other industries that you might want to go into and other skills that might be relevant. So, what's really sort of key at the moment is understanding data visualization, understanding how to analyze data. Many businesses are looking for these kind of skills. So, if you can find courses around that, one thing that we do in the UK that the government does quite well with businesses is they create what's called boot camps, funded boot camps, where essentially says this is targeted to the demand that's needed in the industry, but will fund individuals to go through those. And we run quite a few of those in the UK, and I think it's a great way for governments to engage with training providers to be able to provide the access to that training. So, keep an eye out for those kind of programs that exist in your country. And I also say, have a look, think about the future roles that excite you. We often talk about, we do a lot of employability training, so we talk about building your future CV or your future resume. So think about what the skills are looking for from particular jobs that might excite you, and start to build those and do some searches for what's out there. There will be almost free programs that are out there. Get started on that, and then hopefully from that you can build onwards as well. And I just also one final point to kind of policymakers and those that are involved in government as well, because I know David may speak a bit more to that. But when you're creating programs, simplify your language. One of the challenges with digital skills programs is that there is so much jargon out there. There is so much content that is really hard to understand. So if you're building programs, and this is also for training providers out there, simplify your language, make it accessible, talk about how this would equip someone for the future of work, and always look to share insights across organizations. So I've seen a couple in the chat that have talked about what they're working on. So I'm hoping to chat to a few of these and learn a bit about what they're doing, because it's all about collaboration in this space.
And I think the same can be said for businesses, right? They should also keep it simple, particularly those that have shown us what they are working on. It is great to see that there are efforts in this regard. David, just final thoughts from you as well, but also maybe also speaking to the youth that are confident in their digital capability, that have got great ideas, that have contributed to some of the new things that we have on the table, but that are struggling to find private players, maybe like HP, to even invest and take their ideas on board and take it further. So just talk to us briefly about your thinking around that, and also your final comments briefly.
Definitely. So leading on from the comment that Gori made around, the language, how do we engage? Remember I said one of the key challenges that all countries face right now is how do we actually engage in helping bring a basic understanding of the opportunity. So all of us on this call and the community built around us, we're already believers that there's an incredible opportunity. There's giant amounts of money on the table and relatively easy to access. However, why haven't we changed? And it's mostly, when I look at it, it's mostly a marketing and PR effort. So obviously we want to dispense with all of the jargonism and some of the rhetoric that we have built up that's very wordy, and just come down to, hey, 1 in 3 jobs it involves technology today in this country. In your country, it could mean that these jobs are not just about what's in your village or your community, but hey, would you like to be working for an international company or starting your own? So find the heartfelt connection to what we're really talking about. That is, you can have a really bright future. We can take you as a young person and show you, because they don't know, what it might look like and what it does look like today. So that steps towards the young people who are engaged. So we definitely want to take those who have been through a program, for instance, with Gori or one of the other programs in say, Africa or Asia, who've got there. They've got their digital skill, and they're thinking about, hey, I'm from an entrepreneurial perspective, perhaps they're trying to give back, right? Now this is a really important piece, because it talks about not just those young people who've come up with a solution, but also the NGOs and others who will just simply can't scale, right? So no matter what we do from HP perspective, so HP Life scales really well, it's great, but it was never designed to address the skills gap. And in the same way, we have amazing young entrepreneurs, particularly in the continent of Africa. I run into them all the time. We've got amazing education programs around digital skills. But what they need is they need a place to be gathered. They need a place to be gathered around the bigger picture. Most of them struggle with talking about what they do in reference to, if we did this for everyone everywhere, and should we? And the answer is usually yes. Then what sort of giant impact does that have? How do we extrapolate that? Well, larger companies like mine, the folk that sit in global analyst companies can start to build that picture for governments and communities, and therefore we're connecting the answers, right? So we've got this innovation, we can turn it into scale, but we need to gather these people together. We're often running off doing amazing things, but we're seldom stacked together. And I think that's the opportunity we have today. So if I go back to what is this takeaway, right? So taking those youth, those incredible innovators, people who are literally trying to figure out the impossible, digital access, skill development in the places we just simply don't know how to get to. That's happening, right? But again, it can happen and we'll never hear about it. We need to provide governments a forum where they can gather industry to come alongside these solutions. If necessary, fund them a little more so we can de-risk and research them, right? So that's something we do quite well. And by the way, that's kind of where I am at the moment. It's about sitting with the policymakers and saying, look, we're not experts in digging deeply into the mechanics of what your policy is going to look like, but we can certainly give you a lot of research and inform it. Perhaps that's what we can do, and that gives you the confidence, right? But then we want to gather these entrepreneurs, NGOs, and just say, look, we want to create a curriculum pathway or whatever it is from a permanent perspective within the country that funds this and grows it and accelerates it, right? So that's where I think we are. So here on the call, here on this LKDF forum, we literally have everyone we probably need, bar a few, maybe the rest of the industries who aren't on this call. And we need to gather them in each and every country and start to really nut this out and get it into a form where you have that engagement, both deep and wide. This is a situation where doing this both deep and wide, that is, don't go isolated with your engagement, go as wide as you can and turn that into your action. Yeah, I think that's a big to do. So apart from a marketing issue, because you're certainly not going to get anything without voters.
In there, apologies, just in the interest
That's
of
right.
time. But I think I get the message that you are conveying. I get the sense that, what has come out so far in the session this morning for me is the fact that I think we're all on the same page. There hasn't really been a disagreement or a diverging view. It seems like everyone knows what needs to be done. There's Gori in your line of work, and even Cecilia at UNIDO, and even yourself, David. There's things that you are doing within your spaces that are trying to address this role. I think that what we need to do as we move forward from here is just do a lot more of what we know needs to be done, and also amplify it and scale it up, right? So that it benefits more and more people. But lady and my fellow gentlemen, I am going to have to officially close the panel discussion for today. Or for the session, rather. Thank you so much for engaging, and thank you so much for your valuable insights. I can tell by the activity on the chat that they were well appreciated, and they certainly didn't fall on deaf ears. I will the panel or the audience right now and just alert the audience of what will happen for the remainder of the program. So what's going to happen right now, we're going to take a very brief coffee break. But as from 11 o'clock, we're going to come back again, and there are going to be three sessions that will be run in parallel, just discussing various aspects that are centered around the theme for today, of course, being the digital skills for an inclusive future. And that first session from 11 to 12, you can see the different themes that will be discussed, and you have the opportunity to hop into any one of those sessions. Around 5 minutes before the session that you do choose will notify you to hop in onto that stage. So please do so when you come back from your coffee break. And then what will happen after the midday or the mid-morning sessions, we will again break away for some lunch and convene once again in the afternoon from 2. And 2 to 3, we'll have 3 other sessions that will be run. There again, you can see the different themes that will be discussed at those sessions. And the same thing, you can select which one you want to attend, and you will be notified once you have selected your preferred session, and you can just hop in onto that stage. And then after that, what we will have is we will have our closing ceremony. So we'll all come back again on the same platform at 3 p.m. Central African time in my time zone, but we'll come back for the closing ceremony, and therein we will put to bed everything that has been discussed so far. What I would also like to ask the audience to do just before you go off to your coffee break, could you kindly fill out the survey, the LKDF survey? It is in the chat. Can you kindly fill that out? The team would like to know a little bit more from your mind, so please indulge them. And then back again at 11 for those sessions. Thank you for being with us, and see you again later this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having us.
Mm-hmm.